What if the biggest financial problems we blame on banks, corporations, and governments do not actually start at the top, but quietly begin with everyday human behavior that feels completely rational in the moment? What if greed is not just something that lives in boardrooms and executive offices, but something embedded in millions of small decisions made by ordinary people? And what if Bitcoin is not just an asset class or a trade, but a system specifically designed to expose and break that cycle? In this conversation, Jeff Booth makes a claim that feels uncomfortable at first, that nearly every financial crisis in history follows the same psychological pattern, and that Bitcoin may be the first monetary system engineered to change the outcome. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another podcast summary video. In this one, we break down Jeff Booth's latest appearance on the Coin Stories podcast. What begins as a conversation about Bitcoin quickly expands into something much deeper, a wide-ranging discussion about human incentives, greed, centralization, technological deflation, and why our current financial system behaves the way it does. This episode runs for just over an hour, but don't worry, we've got you covered. We listened to the entire conversation and distilled the most important ideas into a clear, structured breakdown, so you can understand what actually matters without sitting through the full episode. If you find this kind of content useful, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and comment your thoughts below. This supports the channel and lets us know you want more breakdowns like this. Now, sit back, relax, and be prepared to question some deeply held assumptions about money, power, and where Bitcoin actually fits into the future. Jeff begins by reframing how financial crises actually form, arguing that they rarely start with evil intent and almost always begin with normal people responding to incentives. Under the gold standard, banks promised depositors they could always redeem their gold. But behind the scenes, that gold was being lent out, reused, and fractionalized. For a while, it worked, until everyone wanted their gold back at the same time. When the system collapsed, people did not blame themselves for chasing higher returns. They blamed the banks. They blamed greedy institutions. But Jeff points out something far more uncomfortable. The greed came earlier. It came from individuals trying to earn more while outsourcing risk. And once enough people behaved that way, governments and central banks stepped in to fix the problem. The solution was centralization, a federal reserve, regulation that protected people from their own decisions, and in the process, created a permanent extraction mechanism for the entire economy. Jeff argues this was not an accident. It was inevitable human behavior, and it is still playing out today. Jeff then connects that same psychological pattern to what we see happening in modern crypto markets, especially outside of Bitcoin. Why do people chase altcoins, yield schemes, and centralized platforms that promise easy returns? Why does the same behavior repeat, cycle after cycle? Because it feels easier to point at greedy CEOs and corporations than to examine our own choices. When you choose convenience over sovereignty, like having everything delivered to your door instead of walking into a store, that is also a form of greed. Small, rational, human. But when millions of people make the same trade-off, systems centralize. And centralized systems always concentrate power. This is where Jeff pushes back on the idea that Bitcoin will make wealth inequality worse. He argues that the extreme concentration we see today is not a Bitcoin problem at all. It is a product of centralized monetary systems. Before the pandemic, just 3 individuals, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Jeff Bezos, held more wealth than the bottom 50% of Americans. The top 5% owned more than 2/3 of total wealth. And that was before trillions of new dollars were created. So the real question becomes unavoidable. Would that level of concentration exist on a Bitcoin standard? Jeff's answer rests on a simple but crucial distinction that most people miss when they talk about Bitcoin as if it were just another financial asset. Bitcoin is not only an asset, it is money. If Bitcoin were only an asset, it would centralize rapidly. Large holders would dominate, barons would emerge, and the system would eventually collapse under its own weight. But because Bitcoin is also money, it must circulate. If someone holds a large amount of Bitcoin and wants influence, security, or power, they must spend it. They must distribute it. Even something as extreme as building a standing army would require continuously paying people in Bitcoin, which forces decentralization. Jeff points out this is not theoretical. It is already happening. Large holders are selling, not because Bitcoin is broken, but because that is how a functioning free market behaves. Distribution is not a bug. It is the mechanism. Jeff then challenges a deeply held assumption that many people still carry about the past, especially when comparing Bitcoin to gold. The gold standard, he argues, was not a truly free market. Gold naturally centralizes because it is difficult to transport, store, and secure. That made conquest profitable. Nations invaded others, seized gold and raw materials, and forced entire populations into dependency. It was still a zero-sum game. It only looks fair when history is told from the perspective of the winners. From the perspective of the exploited, it looked exactly like what it was: extraction. Jeff contrasts this with a real free market, as described by Adam Smith, an infinite game, where the only way to earn more is to create more value for someone else. When more people enter that system, total value expands, innovation accelerates, and prosperity compounds instead of concentrating. At this point in the conversation, Jeff shifts away from money entirely and towards something far more personal. He asks a question that feels deceptively simple. How much time are you giving to a system that cannot solve any of your problems? Every hour spent angry on social media. Every hour spent arguing inside a broken framework. Every hour spent measuring Bitcoin through the lens of fiat. That time is being extracted. Jeff argues that Bitcoin is not just a financial system. It is a time filter. When you move your time into a system that rewards value creation instead of extraction, outcomes change. Natalie's own career becomes an example. By moving her time away from legacy media and into Bitcoin-aligned work, she created value. And value pulled opportunity toward her. That is not luck. That is incentive alignment. As the conversation turns toward artificial intelligence, Jeff addresses the increasingly popular idea that UBI will be necessary in a world where machines replace human labor. He rejects that assumption entirely. Governments, he argues, do not create value. They extract it. So anything they distribute must first be taken from someone else. In a true free market experiencing deflation, falling prices replace the need for UBI. As productivity increases, goods become cheaper. Even without working, people gain purchasing power. But in an inflationary system, productivity gains are stolen through money creation. Prices rise instead of fall. And UBI becomes necessary just to keep people afloat. Not because abundance is impossible, but because the system prevents it from reaching them. This is how dependency replaces freedom and control replaces choice. Jeff then lays out the alternative future that few people want to confront, but one that logically follows if the current system continues unchanged. In a world of rising prices, job loss, and AI-driven displacement, resentment compounds. Wealth cannot protect itself forever. Technology becomes a weapon. Even someone at the very bottom could gain access to tools capable of massive harm. So the system responds the only way it knows how. More surveillance, more control, more centralization, fear feeding fear. Jeff argues Bitcoin quietly redirects us away from that path, not through force, but through incentives. Jeff believes Bitcoin appeared precisely when it had to, not by accident, but as a natural response to technological and monetary pressures colliding. Cypherpunks warned decades ago that digital money without privacy would lead to total surveillance. Bitcoin solved that problem at the moment it became unavoidable. Every failed experiment before it contributed to its final form. And today, layers built on top of Bitcoin are continuing that evolution. Most people cannot see it yet, because they are still measuring Bitcoin from inside the fiat system. But the protocol does not care. Every 10 minutes, a new block is added, whether anyone believes in it or not. When asked what happens to government in a Bitcoin world, Jeff does not describe chaos or collapse, but something far more subtle. Government gets smaller, more accountable, elected the same way businesses are chosen in a free market, by results. No hidden taxation through inflation, no promises without funding, just transparent proposals and real consequences. A harsher system, but a more honest one. Jeff acknowledges the skepticism head-on, especially the idea that entrenched power will never allow this transition to happen. Power does not give itself up easily. Human nature does not magically change. That is why Jeff spent thousands of hours studying how Bitcoin could fail. And the conclusion he reached is simple. Every attempt to destroy Bitcoin has failed. So the strategy shifts to co-opting it. ETFs, custodians, derivatives, yield. Basically, a recreation of the old system. But Bitcoin is not a company. It is a protocol. And protocols fork. Attempts to centralize it split off and die, and what remains is the base layer, unchanged. As the conversation winds down, Jeff addresses the latest concern making the rounds, the idea that quantum computing will suddenly break Bitcoin. He believes the risk is massively overstated, and that it functions primarily as the newest source of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Just another attempt to control what could not be killed. He is watching it closely, but he does not believe it threatens Bitcoin's future. This conversation ultimately leaves us with a quiet but powerful realization about how change actually happens. Bitcoin is not waiting for permission. It does not require belief. It does not require consensus. It simply keeps working. And slowly, quietly, it forces incentives to change. The question is not whether the system will evolve. The question is where you choose to place your time. Because in the end, time may be the most valuable currency of all, and Bitcoin may be the first system designed to protect it.